Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Firth and my project on popular detective fiction. I will be examining the classic board game known as Clue that we probably all played as children. It gives a little bit of a different perspective on detective fiction. Rather than viewing it or reading it, it makes you actually take part in the mystery. So a brief history on the board game Clue is that it was created in 1944 by Anthony Ernest Pratt, and he originally named it Cluedo. It was created as a pastime for the Nazi bombings by somebody who had a murderous mind who was able to tap into the thoughts of somebody who would create such a murder and allowed him to generate this board game for what people thought was fun at the time, but they could also relate to the situations that were occurring in the world around them. Originally, the murder weapons were era-specific, so there was a bomb and other such things that you no longer see in the modern version of the game. And it took several years for it to actually be sold for the public market due to a limitation and rationing of materials needed to create the board and the pieces. So a summary of the game is that it's randomized. There's a different outcome at the end of each game. Cards are collected and selected at random to determine who the murderer is, the murder weapon, and the room that the murder was committed in. There are 6 different suspects, 6 different murder weapons, and 9 rooms to choose from. It's a turn-based game, and it relies heavily on strategy. Each player receives a card with all the clues on it, and they take turns to roll and get into rooms where they'll make a guess, and each guess contains the suspect, the weapon, and the room that they're currently in. If the person next to them has one of the cards, then we know that they weren't the murderer or the weapon or the room, and they will only show that person. So basically each person needs to come up with their own strategy, whether it be a deductive reasoning based on general principles, an inductive reasoning based on the facts, they only take the information that they know, or whether it's abductive reasoning, so they take the facts that they've gained as well as observations and guesses based on what they see other players showing each other. So a little bit of a breakdown of the game to kind of look into the detective fiction part of it is, first we're going to look at the suspects. So there are 6 suspects total, and each suspect is actually a player in the game. There are 3 males and 3 females, so each gender has an equal opportunity to be the murderer, which also gives you a little insight that, anybody can be a murderer. It's not gender specific, it's not role specific, which is also illustrated by the different class roles represented. Each suspect represents a common class in society. So we have Miss Scarlet, who is the femme fatale. She is the sex icon, the lady who uses her looks to get what she wants. You have Mrs. White, which represents the maid or servant class. You have Mrs. Peacock. She's an elderly aristocrat who exhibits, high moral values and the classic ideal of what a woman should be. You have Professor Plum, who's the intellectual, focuses strongly on his book smarts. You have Mr. Green, who is a corrupt reverend, who claims to practice ideal faith, but actually commits crimes and is not always lawful. Then you have Colonel Mustard, who's the classic military man, game hunter, tough male in society. So this goes to show you that it doesn't matter what your class is, it doesn't matter your gender is, you can't limit a murder suspect to one of those roles because anybody can fulfill that murder role. Then we take a look at the weapons used. So in the game as it is today, you have 6 weapons that are part of the suspect. You have traditional murder weapons, which are a dagger, a rope, and a revolver. And you have non-traditional murder weapons, which would be a candlestick, a lead pipe, and a wrench. So this kind of makes you look at a classic murderer versus a violent murderer, or those who murder based on founded grounds, maybe in retaliation for something or to get something, money, or there's a purpose, there's an end game for the murder. And then you have the violent, unfounded murders where people are just crazy and they just like bloodshed. There isn't really a reason behind the murder, it just happens. This could be seen like with the candlestick or the lead pipe or the wrench. You have to bash somebody's skull in and create a bloody scene that's just ridiculously violent as opposed to stabbing somebody. So you kind of get the idea of the mindset of a murderer, whether they are, intelligent, practical people with bad motives, or whether they are mentally unstable and unable to deal with society or come to logical conclusions or create strategies for the things that they are trying to accomplish. So in conclusion, we can see that we can't always make assumptions based on what we know. We can't use gender roles or class lists or anything to pinpoint a murderer in a case. We can't say that only certain types of things can be used. We can't just look at what's in front of us. We have to dig deep and try to understand the minds of the murderers, the reasons behind it, if there are reasons, whether it's founded or unfounded, and really dig deep and not get stuck on something that may distract us from the real end goal. So Clue is really good at doing this because it's all random and players have to suspect each other or even themselves, because ultimately they could be the murderer. They have to use different types of logic and strategy and look at things from a different perspective. They have to evaluate the people around them and look at them in a light that they may not have before. And they can't limit themselves based on their own biases and saying, oh, that woman is beautiful, she couldn't have done it, or she's such a sweet old maid, there's no way, or he's a nerd, he couldn't have possibly done anything, he can't have a violent bone in his body. We can't limit ourselves that way, and we need to examine the facts and be unbiased when we're trying to determine who committed a crime. And Clue is a great way of making people think outside the box and evaluate that.